Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's first session of our show titled Student Preparedness Bridging the Learning Gap in 2023. My name is Elliot Malkowitz, and I'm the head of content here at Fierce Education, and I will be your moderator for this session. If you missed the opening keynotes by Dr. Mike Barger of the University of Michigan and founding member of JetBlue, and by Sean Michael Morris, VP of Academics at Course Hero, they will be archived shortly. They probably are already, actually, so you can view them on demand. This session will focus on how colleges and universities can better assimilate incoming students to make up for the lack of preparation they may have experienced both scholastically as well as mentally and emotionally during the last couple of years. So here with us today to discuss these specific issues are Chris Lee. He's president, Western Governors University Academy. Chris will then be joined by Nick Rebney. He's vice president, Learning Solutions at Cambridge University Press. Cambridge is sponsoring this session, and we thank them for that. But before we get started, please remember we're going to try to make it as interactive as possible for you. There's a Q&A window and a chat window where you can type a question and interact with your peers. You can even put a question in the chat and we will see it. So please take advantage of that. Remember, the more interactive you are, the more of a valuable experience this will be for you. And now let's turn it over to Chris Lee. He's president of Western Governors University Academy. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Elliot. Good to be with everybody today. I appreciate having a chance to meet on this important topic. I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C., where it is probably 75 degrees. I know that it's not that warm in most of the country, including where I'm from, which is Utah, where they've gotten about 1.5 feet of snow in the last 24 hours. So wherever you are, hope you're having a great day. I'm going to just spend a little bit of time talking about WGU Academy, and I want to start by telling a little story of one of our learners. Chantal Clark came to us a couple of years ago applying to WGU. She had worked as a bookkeeper for some years, and mostly as a tax preparer for the last decade. Had done a little bit of work in college previously, but it had been a long time since she'd been had a successful experience in education. And so WGU recommended that she begin her journey with us through WGU Academy, which I'll tell you more about in a minute. Chantal completed the Academy program in about 4 months and then matriculated into WGU, where she is currently enrolled and on her way to getting her accounting degree, which she expects to complete this September. And it will make a big difference in her life. She's been a bookkeeper and a tax preparer, but this bachelor's degree will allow her the opportunity to actually get a CPA license and probably double or triple her income. Pretty exciting opportunity for her. The problem that WGU Academy was designed to solve, let me just explain about that for a few minutes. So in 2018 and 19, WGU denied admission to as many students as are currently enrolled at the University of Utah and the University of Colorado. And I mention those two states because those are the flagship institutions of the two governors who founded WGU 25 years ago, the governors of Utah and Colorado. And because WGU was having to deny admission to so many learners, it formed a hypothesis for us to say, if there were a way that we could actually ready learners for success, it could help us improve the outcomes for those learners and also improve our return on our marketing efforts. Because when we get learners in our marketing funnel who are not prepared and we can't admit them, we've spent dollars on prospects that really we can't enroll. And so we launched a rapid pilot solution to this in 2019. And of course, have dealt with all of the time we've been doing this has been during the pandemic primarily. We offer a bundle of courses, which I'll tell you about in a second, to provide a guaranteed admission pathway for learners. And since that time, we've served more than 25,000 learners. There are now 6,000 learners enrolled at WGU who've completed the Academy program. And we've actually had 500 WGU graduates that have resulted from this entity we've created. So this is WGU's College and Career Readiness Program. And as I said, it offers a guaranteed admission pathway to WGU. We offer a bundle of two courses with 3 credit units in each course. You can actually add a third course as well. And we're going to be making some significant changes to our program to allow individuals to register for individual courses as well. An average student completes in 3 to 4 months, and 90% of those learners come from one or more underserved backgrounds: low income, first generation students, students of color, and rural students. Those are 4 categories of learners that we track pretty closely. We're going to be expanding over this next year to include prerequisite courses, individual courses, and bundles of courses you might think of as micro-credentials that we'll be offering coming up in the next year. So specifically, our guaranteed admission pathway has several features. We have learners register for 2 individual courses. They begin a foundational college-level course in English, math, history, statistics, or an IT certification if they choose an IT pathway that they're seeking for their degree. And then we couple that with a course we've created called the Program for Academic and Career Advancement. And it's really, we think of this as a non-cognitive course and I can tell you more about what we do in PACA, but it includes social and emotional learning, and requires the learner to not just participate remotely at their own on their own time, but to set up a synchronous time when they'll meet with a group, their PACA cohort, we call it. That facilitator works with them. And then we offer instructors and tutoring for our cognitive courses as well. And then together with those 2 courses, we also provide a wraparound coaching, a personal coach that we've hired almost exclusively certified coaches, executive coaches. And this bundle of services that we offer has had some significant benefits to learners. Remember that most of the learners, if not all of the learners who have come to Academy, were originally denied admission from WGU. And WGU tends to be a fairly open enrollment institution. So when we deny admission, it is because of pretty significant barriers that we observe in their application. And so we've actually seen significant improvement since we launched in 2019 in terms of completion rates of the full bundle. And actually, we've seen about 10 or 15 points higher than this, about 30% if you look at individual course completion rates. We also, as I said, track those individual underserved groups. And one of the really rewarding things we're seeing is that the underserved groups are moving in tandem with the average. We're not seeing gaps there that you might expect that we've seen in other instances. What's really powerful about this experience for learners is that when they complete Academy, they see significant improvement in persistence and completion rates within WGU. And remember, we're talking about learners that originally were denied admission to WGU. So we're seeing a 10 to 15 point spread. A little bit, there's some differences in each of the colleges that they go into, but the College of IT actually has the largest gap, the largest spread of about 15 points between those that have done Academy and those that did not start with Academy. And overall, there's a 16% improvement in 13-month retention compared to the overall WGU average. We've now done this over thousands of learners, and we're starting to see that there's some new opportunities for us to expand what we're doing. And so I'm going to just take a second and let you see some of the quotes of learners. The PACA course in particular is where most learners express their enthusiasm for what we've done at Academy. The individual prerequisite course or general education course that they take is pretty standard, but PACA is pretty unique, and it gets most of the response from students as they complete work with us. We've also mapped all of the skills associated with this PACA course to skills that employers are looking for. In particular, these are soft skills, power skills you might think of. And we've started working with some employers from relationships that were established with WGU. And one of the things we've found is certain employers, particularly McDonald's on this list, had said to us, we noticed that there's a gap in our employees, that we offer them tuition reimbursement through a program called Archways to Opportunity. But we found that many students, many of our employees do not take advantage of those offers. They're simply not ready. They don't believe they're ready. They don't have a vision of what they would like to do in a higher education experience. And so McDonald's and these other employers have encouraged their employees to start with Academy. So we actually have an intake survey that helps identify when a learner might be benefited most from an Academy pathway before they begin. I will just leave it there and wanted to let you know my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. Happy to talk further with anyone about what we're doing at Academy, what we do at Western Governors University to help support these learners who need extra help in becoming ready for higher education success. You can visit Academy's website. Academy.wgu.edu is our current site that we've used for the last 3 years, but we've launched a new product. It's available at goacademy.wgu.edu, and I encourage you to go and feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. And with that, I'll hand it back to Elliot.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you for your thoughts on, how some students are entering, the college environment, and what you guys are doing to obviously assimilate them better. We're going to bring in Nick Rebney now from Cambridge University Press. And first, I want to ask Chris this question, then Nick can join in. Chris, have you seen a difference over the last 2 years? Now, obviously, with the Academy, you're preparing these students in certain markets and certain structures to be more college ready. But have you seen more of a difference or a decline with the students even entering the Academy?
No question, across all of WGU's colleges, 144,000 students roughly enrolled currently, we're seeing changes in the preparation level of learners. On the one hand, they have had often experience in remote education. This kind of screen-based education is not, uncommon for people now. That's a positive, but the negative side is that there's been just a tremendous set of challenges that learners have had, whether that includes employment issues and financial concerns, but it's also there's been a tremendous amount of mental health challenges, and two of our colleges in particular, I think, have seen dramatic changes in the learner preparation and their willingness to progress. And that is our health school, where we're preparing nurses, and our teachers college, obviously preparing teachers. And those are two categories of employment of jobs that certainly have had significant changes, and not generally for the positive during the pandemic.
Absolutely. Nick, what are your thoughts? What are you seeing about this generation entering the universities and some of the struggles that, faculty and administrators are having to try and assimilate them better?
Yeah, well, I'll preface it first by saying I'm not an educator myself, but my role involves speaking with hundreds of higher ed faculty and leaders every semester. So it's a viewpoint of a contributor to the higher ed ecosystem in that way, and certainly an interested spectator and someone involved in the overall approach. But as we see, a high school diploma doesn't guarantee that you're prepared for college. Even a high school diploma from one school and another one down the street, as we well know, aren't the same. So many institutions have adopted remedial courses or other approaches. Chris talked about an interesting one that they're doing at WGU. We partner with Arizona State University. They do similar things through their partnership with Crash Course and YouTube, as they just announced, as well as some other private partnerships with Uber, et cetera. But there are other cost-effective and student-friendly ways to do this in order to raise a student's level to be ready for higher education. Teaching and learning innovations. There was talk about that with the keynote recently, where talked about some interesting ideas that they do in terms of how properly implemented technology tools can play a role, and how students who are already differently prepared can raise their level without falling too far behind.
Now, Nick, do you feel this is more from the pandemic and what some universities and high schools have had to kind of do immediately and not be as prepared as they needed to be to address that issue? Or is it more of a generational thing where they've gotten rid of some standardized testings and some, benchmarks? Where would you point your finger as the root cause?
Yeah, the pandemic did nothing, I don't think, other than really dividing that gap even further between sort of the students who were already really prepared for higher education and those that were, sort of being left behind, those without, the resources to have a quality education in this model right here. So institutions need to do all they can to support that with the statistics that we've all seen about the number of students entering higher education and how many are going to be successful at the end of the day.
Agreed. Now, Chris, you mentioned earlier that some of the students that you're seeing already have some experience, at least, with online learning. However, do you think, at least from the high school level, some sort of knowledge base or some sort of social skills or grace or even emotional toll was taken before entering the college years?
Yeah, there's no question. I would just say that WGU's student population ranges, there's a wide range of age, you might understand if you know something about WGU. We've targeted over the years many people who've not completed and who need WGU to complete a degree that they'd started elsewhere. And so our average age is in the mid 30s. So we're not talking about people, all of the learners at WGU who've come right out of high school, although that is becoming a larger percentage of our student population, learners that are coming right out of high school, younger, a little bit less prepared. I think we've certainly seen evidence as we've taken in learners that have only a high school diploma and don't have any college experience, that the supports necessary for those learners are more significant than those of a learner that maybe, let's say somebody in their mid 30s who's trying to complete a degree, like the woman I mentioned at the outset, Chantal, who's been a bookkeeper, who's had a career, who has a family, who's got some a little more stability than these learners that are coming right out of high school, who've had a very rough, uncertain period in their life over the last couple of years, and frankly have not had great experience in our high school system. Our K through 12 system, I mean, the teachers are doing enormous, yeoman work to get learners as prepared as possible. But the fact is that our systems have not been designed, we're not designed to really support remote learning. And so you're dealing with a lot of learners that, frankly, the last couple of years, I'm not sure that they've had much learning.
Right. And Nick, what would your thoughts be on, is it more of students have gotten out of the habit of how to study, on how to properly prepare for a classroom, or are you seeing just it's more of a mental social stress that's been on them over the last couple of years, or really a combination of both? Because the administrators and faculty really have to approach it from a 360-degree view.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I'm a proponent of more flexible teaching and learning options, more flexible class and enrollment options, and those are starting to take hold. So, along with that is, I think the teaching methodologies has to adapt along with it. I mean, we see whether it's generational or it's exacerbated by the pandemic, students just aren't prepared to learn in the same environment that maybe I was prepared in and my parents were prepared in. So those teaching models need to adjust. There needs to be, and that's got to be systemically, right? It has to start with the institutions. Most research institutions that I talk with, the faculty, many of them aren't interested in making systemic changes to their teaching and learning methodology, partly because it's not rewarded by the institution. That's not the only reason they don't do it, but there is that type of model in most R1 type institutions where they're more looked at for their research potential as opposed to their teaching and learning improvements. And
Right.
with the decline, as I talked about in enrollment and the financial challenges, I think institutions need to look to their faculty to support them in adjusting the teaching and learning to meet the students where they are and better support them as they're coming into the institution.
And I'll get to back to Chris in a second. What does some of that support look like? Because what we hear from faculty is, listen, we're subject matter experts, but now we also have to be technologists. Now we have to know social media. Now we have to engage students differently in ways that we're not comfortable with. Do we have an instructional design person help us with that? Do we have a technologist help us with that? So what type of support does faculty need to do this?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So they need support in terms of education and training themselves. They need to engage partners within the ecosystem. So publishers and ed tech providers must do a better job of partnering with institutions and faculty to help them create better products that serve students and the faculty needs that they have. So there's a lot of adjustment that needs to happen, and it can start from both directions. It can start from these sort of private-public partnerships. We're a nonprofit ourselves, so we're part of the education ecosystem, but we need to do a better job of hearing from the educators and supporting them to help them engage the learners where they're at.
So Chris, if you could get a little more specific on anything that the academy had to do differently or adjust to over the last 2.5 to 3 years to address these types of issues.
Well, I would just say that I talked about this program we've created called PACA, and I would say that that's been a real differentiator for us and has been particularly useful for learners during the pandemic. We use that course to help learners think about issues like resilience, belonging, goal setting, emotional regulation. What we found is that many learners, when confronting, often it's a technical topic, a math or an English writing assignment, that they can't make initial progress. They run up against that assignment and just stop. And we notice that. So one of the great things about WGU is that we've instrumented these functions really in deep ways, so we can identify when a learner is not making progress, when there's been a gap in the amount of time it's taken them to complete an assignment or to start an assignment. And what we teach them in PACA is that, number one, they're not alone. There's a lot of people out there with these challenges. They're not, they
And
should
that's
not
important.
feel like they're somehow the only one who's dealing with these problems. Having sessions as we have that are cohorts where a group of 15 to 20 individuals get together with a facilitator And they're talking about these issues that have been barriers, significant barriers in their lives to success.
Right.
Just that has produced a lot of good progress for these learners because they have identified that they're not alone, and that helps all of us,
Yeah,
I
that's
think, in
key.
knowing that we're not alone.
Yep. Chris, let me run this comment by you, and then I'll ask Nick to comment. This comes from Michelle Coleman in our chat. She says, and I think it's not just high school students, but she specifically says, high school students have gone through a traumatic experience which the world was not prepared for, let alone each classroom teacher. As a whole, they are emotionally, socially, and academically unprepared for college. They struggle so much with connectivity and basic skills that many of us were taught while we were in person in high school. Executive function skills, study skills. That was one of the questions I was trying to get at. What I've seen, because I have three children of my own, is just their routine and their habit of how they studied was thrown off. So how would you respond to that comment?
I mean, everything we've talked about are factors. They are all, there is nothing I would say that is not a factor, and nothing that I would say is a silver bullet solution. Um, this has
Right.
multiple facets of problems and requires multiple solutions on the other end. I have children too in the same kind of situation, and they're fortunate because they have a dad that is on them. But my goodness, there's a lot of students without parental support,
Sure.
without the kinds of supports that help a learner make progress, run into barriers and work through those barriers. And so I think as a whole, we have to find ways to help learners be more resilient. But I don't want people to despair about this. Yes, this has been a really awful situation for many people, and there's been a growing gap, certainly. But there is also evidence that there is resilience among these learners as they're coming back into these experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and and the resilience that they've learned over this period, the experiences that they've had in remote learning, again, using a screen, using Wi-Fi, figuring out the technology, those are all big helps to enable
Absolutely.
more hybrid learning, more online capability, and flexibility in their learning
Right.
experience that I think a lot of learners are looking for.
Exactly. Nick, your final thoughts before we close.
Yeah, I'd want to understand how we can give those students the right lesson at the right time so they can be leveled up as efficiently as possible. Obviously, it doesn't impact necessarily the social and emotional trauma that they've gone through in their preparation days through the pandemic, but purely from an academic standpoint, there's lots of opportunities for faculty and institutions to support student success and meet students where they are, and that's partnering with providers in the space to help level students appropriately. So you can bring those differently prepared students into your course without fear that they're going to fall too far behind or they're going to be so overwhelmed they're not going to be able to take it. So there's many solutions out there. I would agree with Chris. There's no silver bullet, but partnering with the right provider that is a advocate for you and your students will help you meet some of your goals.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you, Chris, for your time. That is about all the time we have for this specific discussion. Don't go away yet. I have some parting information for you. We'd like to thank our sponsor again, Cambridge University Press, for their support. Coming up at 3 o'clock will be discussion focused on course design, hybrid and asynchronous learning best practices. Please make sure to join that. Also, go to the Content Hub and download any presentation or assets that may be valuable to you from our speakers and our sponsors. And finally, don't forget at the end of the show, there will be a Zoom session where our panelists and our audience can participate and talk one on one in a little bit more of an informal environment. So you're not going to want to miss that. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the show.